Welcome back to another edition of the Gabagools podcast. I'm your host, Jeff. With me today, as always, the Cuzzo Dan. This is our episode number 40. I know Rich and I filmed on Friday, so this will be 40 part 2. How we feeling?
Boy, I am feeling. I'm feeling 40 is what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Hopefully, I'm not 40 yet, right? Age wise, but right now, number 40. I'm feeling 40. I'm practicing my Bruce Lee moves over here. I don't know if you were watching me, but yeah, I'm feeling good. Feeling
Oh,
limber.
yeah. Always got to look loose. Yeah. So obviously we do a famous player for that was number 40. I'm just going to lead us off real quickly and say Gal Sayers from the Bears. That was a bright spot for the Bears running backs. Played 7 years with the Bears. He's a Hall of Famer, four-time Pro Bowler. He did win a Rookie of the Year in 1965. Just a hell of a player, obviously. So, yeah.
Hall of Famer.
Yep. Hall of Famer, 39 touchdowns, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, that's not really that much. But when you think about when you were playing back then, it's like, yeah, I mean, some of those guys are really good.
Oh, he was like the Walter Payton before Walter Payton. He was pretty amazing before those injuries. Yeah, number 40. Real quick, between 39 and 41, right? Right in the middle. Even number. Also, the time when a man or woman starts to kind of get over the hill, right? So, number 40, watch out for that. My guy, I looked at a bunch of sports. Bartolo Colon was another name that popped up for me. I didn't have his statistics for that year, but he won the Cy Young wearing 40 for the Angels. And, if you're a baseball fan like we have, like we were growing up, he was a pretty darn good pitcher for a while. Had a really long career. Probably not going to be in the Hall of Fame, I would imagine, but a really good pitcher for a while.
Yeah, all of very fun to watch. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny. Right before the Sox traded for James Shields, Bartolo Colon actually hit a home run off of him that year back when pitchers were hitting. So
I remember that.
yeah, that just ruined James Shields after that.
Yeah, I don't think you can give up a home run to a guy like that and continue to be any
No,
sort of respectable in the league. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, let's jump in. Week 12 rundown.
Week 12. So we give it to you loud, we give it to you straight, and we, as always, start on Thursday night. So Thursday night, Steelers go ahead in the fourth, but Browns chubby too thick to handle. Cleveland gets dubbed 24-19. Titans stun Texans at home. Will Levis does his best Jerry Maguire impersonation. Show me the money! 32-27. John Parker Romo, more like John Parker Homo. We knew where that was going, right? 30-27 in overtime, Minnesota. Cowboys upset? Surprise? No, stupefy Commanders on onside attempt 34-26. Tua throws 4 touchdowns. Miami scores 24 in the second quarter. Go on to romp New England 34-15. Kansas City clearly the better team, but Panthers make it close. At the end, 30-27, Kansas City. Bucky's Buccaneers get back on track against the worst team in the NFL. 37, Tampa Bay. Lions continue to look like the pride of the NFC. Stomp Colts 24-6. Denver turns up the heat in the fourth as they continue playoff pursuit. 29-19 over the Raiders. Seattle wins boring game and jump into tie for first with Arizona, beating Arizona 16-6. How about this one? Cheese Packers stomp the yard on 49ers 38-10. This one is just easy. Saquon pummels Rams at home with historic night. Had to throw this in there. 9th most rushing yards in the single game history. 37-20 Eagles, or I should just say the Barclays. And tonight we got Baltimore at the Chargers. A whale of a game, should be 7:15 p.m.
Yeah, you nailed it. Tonight's game should be a good one. I don't know. A lot of fantasy implications in the line for me on a couple of those games. We'll get to that at the end. But let's jump right in with the Thursday game. The Snowball, as we call it, was an amazing game to watch just because Jameis playing in the snow was just something you have to live to see. Like him just in general. I don't know if you're a fan of Jameis as much as I am. Like if I could trade for him and just strictly have him as a morale guy on my fantasy teams, I would because he is too funny. I was trying to find his quote from Thursday about like wanting to play in the snow and he's thankful for it and just he's just an amazing guy. But yeah, was shocked the Browns ended up pulling that one out.
Yeah, I mean that was a game. There were a couple stunners this week. And I feel like the
Yeah,
last couple of weeks there maybe weren't as many. This week we had a few games that kind of make you shake your head a little bit. Good for Cleveland to beat Pittsburgh. For Pittsburgh, that's a tough loss. They're still 8-3. Had a great season. Still probably going to be in the playoffs, but you're going for that, trying to get that number one seed. Now you lose again. Um, like I said, good for Cleveland. It's a good story, but in reality, that's a bad loss for Pittsburgh. That should
it
have been
was
a fairly easy win for them. Not that Cleveland's a bad team. They could, I mean,
they are
anyone could beat anybody, but
bad.
yeah, that's a bad loss.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure doesn't help the cause for Pittsburgh trying to get a bye week like we just talked about like last week. Yeah, Nick Chubb pummeled his
Chubby,
way in there for 2 touchdowns. Only 59 yards.
yeah.
And granted he had like one of the worst injuries in history and he came back from it. So I mean to temper the expectations, but you never know. I mean, homie was doing his thing out there though, but only 59 yards was kind of wild.
Yeah.
Um, moving into, we'll just knock it out early. You've got the Minnesota at Chicago. Obviously, Minnesota won 30-27 in overtime. The conclusion of that game was obviously not what the Bears wanted. Very easily could have been won. They had a field goal blocked again, but they did kick the game-winning field or game-tying field goal to go to overtime, and then they received the ball, so morale was pretty high, especially being at home. You had Caleb Williams, and just on the previous drive, lead them downfield to get the field goal, and then just kind of didn't look too good on that last drive. A lot of rookie mistakes. The one play specifically that stood out to me was when Caleb held the ball for like probably 10 seconds, had all the time in the world, and then his offensive line essentially just gave up and the one Minnesota defender walked right into him basically and sacked him.
You know, um, it's good to see this new offensive coordinator and Caleb obviously are clicking much more than Waldron and him were. He's looked a lot better the last few weeks. I've been on Team Caleb the whole year. I'm not someone who's been wishy washy. I think the guy's good. I think he's very good, and I think that you know he looked really good. He was going toe to toe with Sam Darnold, who's had a resurrection this year. I think Darnold was 330 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Caleb had 340 with
Yeah.
two. Both had great games. Minnesota's 8-2 now; they're 9-2. You could see why they're a good team. The missed field goal from Cairo again hurts earlier in that game, and then the way we ended just as before overtime, that was great, right? I mean, we're losing the game, we come back, we score, we get the ball back, kick the field goal. I mean, I didn't expect us to win this game, but I'm just glad we looked good and we made it close and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, when you go enter the fourth quarter, DJ Moore catches that 10-yard pass from Caleb. You miss the 2-point conversion. If you kick the extra point, you
Yeah.
go ahead on that one, or not go ahead, but you're still in better shape. Minnesota comes down, kicks a field goal, and then, Caleb's able to will them back, gets the 1-yard touchdown to Keenan Allen. Once again, they had to attempt the 2-point conversion. And then, the Cairo Santos field goal, obviously, to tie it up off of the onside kick. You can't draw it up any better, obviously. It's a shame that they didn't win, but overall, like I said, that's one of the ones that one of the games that you kind of just look as a Bears fan, and you do. I mean, yes, losses suck, and you not where you want to be, but to never have a QB and do it with like I don't want to say as little with a porous offensive line and the coaching that's been terrible for him to still
Yeah.
be able to develop and be able to complete passes and lead an offense like he is should show some bright spots for him. So sucks. Going to be picking high again, but at least you could hold your head on high that like you guys have Caleb
Yeah.
Williams and he's an elite asset and he's only going to get better. So rookie mistakes, but still.
Agreed. Yeah, let's protect this guy. I don't know if anyone's listening, Ryan Poles, whoever the hell's up there, but let's protect this fucking kid. All right.
For real. That being said, let's move into the next game. We had Detroit at Indianapolis, 24-6. Detroit won easily. Not much of a surprise there. Indianapolis doesn't have the willpower or the manpower to compete with the Detroit team.
Yeah.
Richardson had a really good game against the Jets. Not this time around. They didn't even score a touchdown. So obviously hard to win when you're kicking field goals. But Detroit came out this game and didn't light up the scoreboard. They didn't score a touchdown. I think this was the first time all year they didn't score a touchdown in the first quarter. So, they were down and they had to kind of rally 3 points. So really rally, but their running game is just so elite and they have so many options. Laporta played. So, just breaking it down like that, they have a ton of weapons and we've discussed it before. I think, you never know who it's going to be one day or the other. But the one thing that you definitely know is that these running backs are going to get theirs. Gibbs had 2 touchdowns. Montgomery got his too, which was actually a really impressive touchdown. St. Brown got he didn't score a touchdown, but he looked pretty good.
He always does. St. Brown is elite. I'll tell you who didn't really do anything was Laporta. He kind of screwed me in one of my leagues. I should have started Jonnu. Wasn't sure about him after the week prior. Had the big week, but just getting back to Detroit, they look good. Yeah, did they start a little slow? Sure, but you know what? They were expected to win this game. They won big. And for me, I think the bigger thing is they didn't even give up a touchdown, like you said. A couple of field goals, just like you said, very tough to win kicking. So, you know what? Yeah, we're going to see how they finish down the stretch, but Detroit looks very good.
Yeah, the one bright spot for the Colts was Michael Pittman finally got his. So your
Yeah,
fantasy owners that still have him, at least he finally did something for you. I'm one of those people he did something for. You mentioned Jonnu, so let's jump into that game. New England at Miami was a absolute
yeah,
slaughter. Miami took over, won 34-15. The second quarter they put up 24 points.
yeah.
It didn't. The Patriots are not a good team by any means. They're like that sneaky team that has pulled out a couple wins, both against us, our fan bases. But Devon Achan showing what he can do and proving that he still is Tua's guy. And then Jonnu Smith has been a very big surprise.
Yeah.
Probably is going to win. I say this with a couple people, but he's going to win people their fantasy titles this year if Tua continues to be consistently throwing to him. The guy just seems to always be open and catching touchdowns in the goal line. But let's not take away, though. Jalen Waddle finally woke up from the dead, and he went 8 for 144 and won. So, if you finally held out hope with Jalen Waddle and started him, he finally rewarded you.
Yeah, I saw Waddle had a nice game, so good for him. Tua with the 4 touchdowns. Obviously, like you said, New England, you don't really have a whole lot of expectations with a team like that right now. But, yeah, Tua looked great. Didn't get hurt this game, so that's always a plus. And,
Yeah, we're
yeah,
rooting for him. I know we make jokes about Tua, but it's good to see that he's out there and he actually is looking competent. But why is he not throwing to Tyreek Hill? Is it because Tyreek Hill is literally so hurt that he's just kind of being a decoy out there? That's what I
must
want to
be.
know.
Must
So
be, because he's done nothing all year.
yeah, literally nothing. He had one good game, and that was like the first week in a season, and it
Yeah,
wasn't even anything that Tyreek Hill does. When I don't know about for you, and I don't know if you've ever owned Tyreek Hill, especially when he was with the
I
Chiefs.
did. I did the last couple of years.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
had him in our dynasty league that you just joined last year. I had him, Mahomes, and Kelsey, and they always played on like the primetime games. So it was like the Grim Reaper. And I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where the door is sitting there and then you got the Grim Reaper just like cutting people down. Um, he pretty much having the three of those guys was like the Grim Reaper because you always knew that each of those guys was getting you at least 20, at least,
Yeah.
and sometimes more. Mahomes would get you 60. Kelsey and Hill would get 40 each. It was awesome. It was a time to be alive. And you might be like, oh, you had that team. How many championships did you win with that squad? Zero.
And that's shocking because, especially when Hill was with KC those last couple of years, I mean, he's putting up 30, 40-point games, 50-point games. You're like, all right, dude, like it's not fair. It's like, what's his name on Cincinnati with Burrow, Chase.
Yeah. Just
Unbelievable.
inconsistent during the playoff when it came down to it. Long story short, you've heard the stories a million times about losing in the playoffs. So, we won't reopen old wounds. But yeah, kind of odd too. Devon Achane only had 32 rushing yards, but he's catching passes. I think that's what matters most.
Right.
Moving into Tampa at New York, the Stinky Giants started our Italian brethren Tommy DeVito. Dun, da, 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 dun, da, da. And no, that's not racist or anything. It's what we do with chicken cutlets here.
There you
But
go.
they looked absolutely awful, and I was unfortunately had to start Tommy DeVito in like honestly like 4 or 5 leagues because of this bye week that we have in week 12 with no Cincinnati, no Josh Allen for Buffalo. So, we had to start Tommy DeVito, and obviously he didn't do anything. The one lone touchdown that the Giants did score was Devin Singletary on the one. Those Tyrone Tracy owners were very frustrated because he pretty much
Oh,
got benched after he fumbled one time, which that's not a way to go about a rookie. But yeah, the Bucks, Mike Evans return. They look good. Mike Evans didn't score, but they have a three-headed monster at running back. But it should be known that there's really one that's going to matter over fantasy, or at least should matter, and that's Bucky Irving. He has shown that he is that elite asset. And they got him for pretty cheap, and he played at Oregon. He was an amazing running back. He went 12 for 87 and one, and honestly, he got vultured in the first quarter by Sean Tucker, and then I think in the third as well from Rashad White. So, anything on this game? I mean, Baker. I love watching Baker play too.
Baker, yeah, I mean he looked solid. This was the Bucky Irving game for me. He looked great in that game, and you know we all knew Tampa Bay was going to win this game. Obviously, this is their chance to kind of get back on track after that last month or so that gauntlet they had to run. But yeah, that's Giants suck.
Giants do suck. Simple as that. Looking at the schedule too, like it just shows how bad some of these matchups were, and it kind of was just an underwhelming week. Next one, kind of a surprise game. Dallas pulled out that game against Washington, 34-26. It was pretty. It was a very boring game. I don't know if you watched it at all, but watching it, I had it on one of the quad boxes here, and it was a very lackluster game up until the third quarter. Nobody scored a touchdown. Then Jaden finally had that big run, and then Tolbert had that touchdown from Cooper Rush. And it was 13-9 entering with like 5 minutes left, and then you see Dallas start turning it on. Brandon Aubrey hits that 48-yard field goal, and then Luke Schoonmaker it is, had that 22-yard touchdown from Cooper Rush, which he was wide open. They nailed it there, gave the ball back to Jaden Daniels. He marched downfield, hit the 40-yard touchdown to Zach Ertz. You thought, oh, hey, you're only down 3. Washington kicks the ball, and then Keontae Turpin, who might be one of the fastest guys in the NFL currently, returns a kickoff for 99 yards, puts him in a bigger hole. Washington comes out, kicks a field goal. McLaurin hits a big 86-yard pass from Jaden Daniels for a touchdown, and they miss the PAT. So, unfortunately, Washington kind of died there at that point.
Yeah, I mean, this game I didn't see a ton of, but admittedly so. But yeah, I think this is three in a row for Washington that they've lost. And you started the season really well. You had a couple of kind of big wins. You've had maybe some slight growing pains with Daniels the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe the defense hasn't been as good, but still a good team. But on a bit of a skid here, and it doesn't
Eagles
get
keep
any
winning
easier.
too.
Yeah,
So, I mean, they'd be a year ahead of schedule if they were.
yeah,
Um, I mean, you have to still hold your head high. I mean, if you told me that like the Jets next year could draft a QB and then be in the position that Washington's in, I would be thrilled. Um, it's
yeah.
unfortunate, that my team will not do that. But anyway, yeah, Washington needs to do some work. Kansas City at Carolina. KC pulls it out 30-27. Once again, let Mahomes have the ball back with too little time. But give Bryce Young his flowers. This is probably his best game that we've seen to date. He didn't really do a whole lot, but that being said, he led them down for quite a few field goals, and you know, just Kansas City's too good. But I was shocked to see Carolina come back like they did. But good growth for Bryce Young after getting benched, and people were saying, "Hey, that might be the end of Bryce Young in Carolina." They might keep him now, but David Canales, I think is his name, is a head coach for Carolina. He's a QB whisperer.
You know, I was just wondering about this game coming into it because Kansas City had just got their first loss, I think, the week prior to Buffalo. So you're like, okay, Kansas City's going to come out with a vengeance. But Kansas City also hasn't been the same team this year as they've been
No,
in the last previous seasons. And for them to only beat Carolina by 3 points, Carolina, maybe they score late in that game, but it just shows, yeah. Like you said, Bryce Young looked pretty solid. I don't think he made a ton of mistakes in this game, if any. I mean, I'm sure he made a couple, but to lose to three to the 10-1 Chiefs or whatever is pretty good.
yeah. They've been playing a lot of close games, Kansas City, that is too. So I mean, they lost one to Buffalo. We'll see what happens going forward. But jumping in Tennessee at Houston, like you said, Tennessee shocked Houston in that one, and I think we're just seeing that Tennessee or Houston is kind of flawed this year, and we're starting to see that sophomore slump from C.J. Stroud, and I don't know. I don't know what it is that specifically about them, but their offense is kind of stagnant unless it's Mixon going off for 3 touchdowns. Very inconsistent team that's going to make the playoffs, and just we'll see what they do. I mean, you almost have the tale of two games where you see Houston go out and absolutely punch someone in the face, and then vice versa. They lose these bad games against Tennessee. But like you said, anybody could beat anybody on any given Sunday. Um,
That's the exciting part. But yeah, you look at this one. I mean, I don't know if Cleveland beating Pittsburgh or Tennessee beating Texans were. I don't know which one is the bigger upset there.
I think you have to
Especially,
say Cleveland, just because they were so. I mean, Tennessee's really bad,
yeah,
but I don't know.
right.
Cleveland pulling it off. I think Pittsburgh's a better team to answer your question.
I would agree. But I mean, you got Tennessee. I mean, they've done next to nothing this year.
Yeah,
Um,
Will
you
Levis looked
know,
good. What the
he
hell is
did.
going on there? He took a lot of
He's
bad.
he's had a couple games where he's thrown for close to 300 or more yards this year. He's had a couple decent games. The Texans, I don't know if it's the defense. I think they definitely had some games where the offense hasn't done a lot. I don't think they ran the ball a lot. I think Tennessee doubled them in rushing yards, if I'm not mistaken. So,
Yeah,
you're putting a lot of pressure on your second year quarterback, and he doesn't have all of his weapons. Obviously, Diggs is out for the rest of the year. Collins just came back, so he should be good. But yeah, Houston's kind of funky right now. I don't know if it's the
weird.
defense.
Can't get
I
a
don't
read on
know.
him.
Yeah,
Can't get a
you
read
can't
on
you
him.
can't give up 32 points to a Tennessee offense though. You can't do that.
No. Next game, Denver at Vegas. Part of a very boring afternoon slate, if we're being honest. It was such a boring game. Like I was sitting there watching, I'm like, these are so boring. I mean, Minshew got hurt in this game, so he's done for the year. So it's probably his career that's toast. But Bo Nix once again leading the team down the field. Obviously, Cortland Sutton 2 tutter game. That's huge. Virtually no rushing yards in this game either, which was weird. Jacoby Myers led the team, like the team's total, with 121, and he's kind of had a quietly good year. Coming from New England Patriots team a couple years ago. But yeah, a lot of field goals.
Denver, you know what? I think they're 7-5, if I'm not mistaken. Um, they quietly just keep winning some games, and they're putting themselves in that playoff hunt. The that conference is going to be interesting down the stretch. We've got a really, really, really good game tonight. Um, but they just keep winning games, which is very interesting.
Yeah,
Another rookie quarterback who's playing well.
yeah, they're probably going to sneak in with that last seed too, so that'll be fun.
They might.
Moving into what would have been a really good game if Brock Purdy played was 49ers at Green Bay. 49ers are in some trouble, man. Not only
Five and
because Brock
six.
Purdy didn't play, but 5-6. Their division keeps winning. Seattle won again. We'll talk about them later, but they got their asses kicked by Green Bay, and it wasn't even close. That defensive
No.
line's not the same. I know they have a lot of injuries, but this is constantly, Purdy sat out. Nick Bosa wasn't playing. And, overall, Green Bay just marched down the field, and Josh Jacobs had the 3 touchdown game, the trifecta. And Jordan Love just did enough to get by.
You know, um, this is one of those where when you don't have a reliable backup quarterback, even if your starter is great, your team really, pardon my French, shits the bed when you
Yeah.
have to bring that next guy in. I don't know what happened with Purdy, but I had
It's
a
a
big
shoulder.
shoulder. I mean, is he supposed to be back next week?
They said it's not supposed to be long term, so we'll see.
I mean, the only thing you could say for San Francisco, they're 5-6, but so are the Rams, and then Seattle and Arizona are only one game better than them. So
Yeah.
it seems like they're so far out because we're not used to them being 5-6 at this point in the season. But they're in reality they're only a game back. And you know what? I had the Rams, stunning people and coming back, and then they go out and we'll get to that game with that wildness. But that division is nuts.
Yeah, I mean, equally as nuts though as the three-headed monster in the NFC North. I mean, Packers are proving that they're going to make the playoffs as well. But jumping in across the Midwest into the West with Arizona at Seattle. Seattle won 16-6. A lot of penalties in this game. Had this on one of the TVs, and it was just overall very, very, very boring game. Really came down to a Kobe Bryant, and no, not that Kobe Bryant, 69-yard interception return in the third quarter, and that was kind of like the lone. I mean, JSN did his thing, like we said, his great year is still continuing.
Hmm.
But that was the difference maker, and Cardinals offense once again just goes flat. It's either they're throttling teams or there's non-existent. James Conner was non-existent, Marvin Harrison was non-existent, McBride had a huge day. So if you're playing in a tight end premium, he went 12 for 133. Still no touchdowns receiving this year. His one lone touchdown was a rushing touchdown. I don't know. Cardinals, I didn't expect to be very good, but I mean, they're still tied for the division. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, wacky division with all those teams, like we were just saying. Good win for Seattle. Terribly boring game to watch if you were a fan of either of those teams. And just like you said, Arizona's kind of hit or miss, right? They could score 40 or they could score like 4. So,
Yep. Moving into probably the game of the week was Eagles at the Rams, 37-20. Eagles, Saquon Barkley set the franchise record with 255 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. And overall, that last touchdown was a garbage time touchdown that they scored. And pretty much, I watched until halftime and went to bed. And I was actually down in one of my matchups, and Barkley had that huge night and put up 78 in our format because of we play that half point per carry, and he went absolutely off. Had the 72-yard rushing touchdown, and then he also had that other 70-yarder in the third quarter.
Yeah, I mean, ninth most rushing yards in a single game in history tells you a little bit about what he did. I think he was just over 300 yards for total with his receiving, but
Yeah,
my goodness, I mean, he's in that. He's got to be in the MVP talks now.
he will
I
be.
don't
He
think
won't.
he's.
I don't think
I
he
don't think
wins, but yeah,
he's not going to win it, but with the type of season he's having and some of the big games he's had, I mean, he's you want to talk about the biggest blunder of the season? It's signing Daniel Jones long term and letting Saquon walk. I mean,
I feel like we talk about that on a weekly basis. Is just how that was the most. That's going to go down in history because it was on Hard Knocks
could
too.
be.
It's going to go down in history as like the biggest bonehead move a GM can make. I mean, they're going to get fired from it too. So, yeah. I mean, that being said, I mean the Rams, still put together a decent fantasy day for the owners. I mean, Stafford had 2 touchdowns and 240. Kyron Williams had that touchdown, 72 yards rushing. And then Puka, Mister like 100 yards a game, and then Cooper Cup still old reliable, 8 for 60 and one. So, where do the Rams go from here? Hopefully up. I'd like to see McVay make it to the playoffs one more year with that team, but we'll see. But the Eagles, kind of, I
They're
mean,
back.
they're back. They're leading. I mean, they have every chance in the world to win this whole Super Bowl too. Honestly.
They kind of have a new identity now with Barkley, right? I mean, they've had some good backs. I think they had Swift last
Swift
year. He's
last
good, but
year. Yeah.
Saquon is that difference maker. We've seen it. We've seen it in college. We've seen it in the pros. He's had some trouble staying on the field, but obviously when he's healthy, I mean, I think he's maybe number two. He's right up there with the top couple people for fantasy points this year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. He's been
he's been
insane.
unbelievable.
Yeah. Should be a good game tonight. I need Herbert to hold off. I need Herbert and Henley in an IDP league to hold off Lamar, Henry, and Quentin Johnson. So we'll see what happens tonight.
I'm predicting this to potentially be more of a lower scoring defensive game. We'll see if that happens, but
I mean,
I
if you
kind of need
beat,
that to happen.
yeah, you could get your first win against Rich, which would be hilarious. If you end up pulling them out in Gridiron.
What's the score on that? I don't even know if I even checked that one this
Let
week
me.
because it was.
You actually had a huge week too. That was the funny part. You put up like 257.
Oh, Richie!
Yeah, you got 257 with or 258 with nobody left. He has 226, and he's got Lamar and Henry left, and Henley. So probably not going to pull out the win, but
Yeah, I don't think so. No, I think either one of those guys will be able to do it.
it's going to be one. It's going to be one carry, and then you can just click it off and be like, "I'm done."
You know what though? It could be close if it's a defensive game and Lamar doesn't go crazy and King Henry doesn't go too wild either. It could be close. I'm just saying,
It could,
Rich could be sweating this one out a little bit.
it could happen. You remind me of Angels in the Outfield. It could happen.
It could. You just got to believe.
Yep, just got to believe. All right. Well, that's our show. Happy Thanksgiving. Dan, I will see you in person on Thursday. And
I'll see you.
we'll be enjoying some turkey and breaking down some football.
Happy Thanksgiving to the millions of people watching at home. We know, thanks for the support. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the meal. I mean, I look forward to it every year.
Awesome.